I'm a curmudgeon's curmudgeon. I'm an animal. I'm a tyrant. I'm a physical peon. I'm a man. I'm incompetent with women. I'm one of the great Casanovas of all time. I'm a hypocrite. I'm a coward. I'm a nut job.
Welcome to Termini Crashes Out, an NBA podcast with Justin Termini, brought to you by DCLA. And now it's time for Termini to crash out.
All right, time for Termini to crash out. It's episode number 4. You can find them all on the YouTube page at youtube.com/Termini Radio. That's youtube.com/Termini Radio. You can go there, you can like, you can subscribe, and hopefully we'll get the subscriber count continuing to grow. Again, this is only the 4th episode. We're up over 100 subscribers. Hopefully that continues. I'm going to do these as much as possible in order to supplement the show that you normally hear me on with Eddie Johnson from 4 to 7 Eastern time. A bunch of stuff I want to hit on today, including Luka Doncic, why he's 4th place on my list of MVP candidates. Now, the top 4 is pretty clear cut. I believe in some type of order that's going to involve Wembanyama, Jokic, SGA, and Luka, but then I think that there's a big gap after that. But Luka, to me, is pretty clearly 4th. I'll explain here throughout the course of the program. We'll talk about another season for the Celtics winning 50 games in a gap year. But I want to start about talking about the Miami Heat. And I'm also going to tell you a behind-the-scenes story on Mike Dunleavy Sr. as it relates to Joel Embiid, the Milwaukee Bucks, and why they should have listened to him. We did a show a couple of days ago to celebrate Rick Barry's 82nd birthday, and I think that might be something that we do more of here on the show, is some of the behind-the-scenes stories like I did with Rick, because I rattled off 5 or 6 really funny stories with Rick and got some good feedback there, and that's stuff that, I could still talk about the Heat, the Luka stuff, the Celtics on the normal show. That's something with the behind-the-scenes stories that we can get more into here when it's not so singularly focused on what was going on the night before. But I want to start with the Miami Heat because, as you recall, right after they beat the Washington Wizards, Bam Adebayo puts up 83 points. There was a lot of pushback on the organization. Now, I wasn't one that was given the Heat pushback, but there was plenty of pushback out there. And one of the responses that Eric Spoelstra gave was that this was going to put some pressure on the Heat, and he thought that it would push them forward and propel them to have some success the remainder of the season heading into the postseason. And he also accused the Washington Wizards of losing on purpose. Well, let's start with what's going on with Miami and the fact that it's actually been the opposite of what Spoelstra said. So Spoelstra said, I think this is going to push us forward. This is going to help us take the next step. It's actually been the exact opposite. Ever since Bam's 83 points, Miami has gone 2-7, including 1-7 in their last 8 games. And it really came to an apex last night with a 135-118 loss to a Pacers team that is 17-58 on the season. So Indiana has the worst record in the entire NBA. They're not trying to rack up wins. Again, just like Spoelstra accused a couple of weeks ago, the Washington Wizards. And yet, they beat them by nearly 20 points. They beat Miami by 17 points, and it should have been a game where Miami was ultra-focused because they got to get off the snide here and start playing some good basketball. So they couldn't take Indiana lightly, and the defense really has fallen off a cliff ever since that Wizards game. So since March 12th, Miami has the 4th worst defense in the entire NBA. That's better than only Indiana, who they just lost to yesterday, Milwaukee, and Sacramento. And all 3 of those teams have something in common. They're losing on purpose. They're tanking. They're trying to get a high draft pick. That's not the case with Miami. Think about that. Spoelstra accuses the Wizards of attempting to lose games on purpose. He says they're not trying to win. That was part of his criticism after Bam's 83 points. Yet since then, since Spoelstra accused Washington of not trying to win on purpose 2.5 weeks ago, Washington actually has a better defense than the Miami Heat. What does that tell you about your defense and the job that you're doing if you're trying to win and your defense is worse than a team you think, and everybody really thinks, is trying to lose? That should tell you something. And the other thing I don't want to hear during this stretch where, they're giving up 135 points to a team like Indiana is Bam Adebayo making his pitch for Defensive Player of the Year. You can't have a stretch like this. So they're doing a lot of talking about Bam being the Defensive Player of the Year, but they're not actually going out there and doing that on the floor. You can't claim that you're a Defensive Player of the Year candidate or even an All-NBA defensive candidate, and you're anchoring a defense that looks like this over the last couple of weeks. So the defense has been bad. The team has been bad. We're headed for another play-in, and really that's been the case the last couple of years. This is going to be their fourth consecutive season as a play-in team. All right, a team that talks about they only are in pursuit of championships. This will be 4 consecutive years as a play-in team. And here's my question. I didn't think that this should have been the case at the beginning of the year. And now even more so, I'll make a stink about this moving forward. And this was, I thought Rick Carlisle, and ironically enough, Carlisle beat Spoelstra last night, but also ironically enough, Rick Carlisle has the worst team in the NBA this year, so it doesn't necessarily make Carlisle look good. But I thought Carlisle should have been called heading into the season the best coach in the sport based off what he did with Indiana last year. And the fact that about 15 years earlier, he also went to the NBA Finals with a team that wasn't supposed to win, and ironically enough, beat Eric Spoelstra in that Finals. But for 6 consecutive years, Eric Spoelstra in the GM survey at the outset of the year has been named the best head coach in the sport. He's received that title from the executives around the league. Why is that the case, and why should that be the case moving forward? I would, listen, I have great respect for Eric Spoelstra. I still think he's one of the better head coaches in the sport. But to clear cut say that he's the best, to me, just isn't correct. And I think it's also fair to say that this is now 2 consecutive years where he hasn't necessarily covered himself in glory. Now, I'm not saying they should fire Eric Spoelstra. I'm not saying he's done a horrific job. But I am saying he shouldn't be called the best head coach in the sport blindly after this season. And think about this with the Eric Spoelstra rosters, okay? This is what he has done in the non-LeBron James years of his career. So he has coached 14 seasons without LeBron. These are the seeds in a very weak Eastern Conference that he has coached. He has coached a 5th seed, a 5th seed. He has missed the postseason. A 3rd seed, missed the postseason. 6th seed, missed the postseason. 5th seed, 6th seed, 1st seed. Year they went to the finals a couple of seasons ago. Or no, I think that was the year they lost to the Celtics in the conference finals. But 1st seed, 8th seed, 8th seed, 10th seed. But they did make the postseason. That was last year, right? They were the 10th seed. They won 2 play-in games. They got into the postseason only to get swept in the most lopsided playoff series we've ever seen from a point perspective by Cleveland. And now currently they're the 9th seed. So this is the 4th consecutive season that they're going to be a play-in team. And without LeBron James on his roster, he's had home court in the playoffs twice in 14 seasons in a weak Eastern Conference. Why shouldn't the expectations be greater than that? Even Joe Mazzulla, for instance. Boston was supposed to be worse than Miami this year if you look at the Vegas odds. Boston was missing their star in Jason Tatum for basically 50-plus games. They lost Drew Holiday in the offseason, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, Luke Cornett. Joe Mazzulla still has him as the 2nd seed. So Mazzulla will be a 2nd seed this year, despite the lack of expectations. Spoelstra, without LeBron James on his roster, has been at least a 2nd seed just once, only one time, and that was a 1 seed. So he's finished in the top 2 seeds just once in his career without LeBron James on the roster. And Pat Riley and the Heat, who are supposed to be the best organization in front office in the entire sport. So again, something has to give. I think a great head coach, but maybe the reputation is a little bit better than the actual product. Now, the other thing I want to get to here is the MVP race and Luka Doncic. And we will also touch on this a little bit more in depth on the show with Eddie coming up 4 to 7 Eastern time on Sirius XM NBA radio. But Luka right now has the third best odds to win the award at plus 1,500. So that's behind both SGA at minus 275 and Wembanyama at plus 210. You have Jokic at plus 6,000. So Jokic a distant fourth on this. Luka a distant third. And then SGA and Wemby kind of tight at the top, although SGA still does have the clear nod. So Mark Stein, who's doing a show on Sirius XM NBA Radio, in fact, just got done with the show about an hour ago, said this on our air today about Luka being the biggest threat to SGA in the MVP race. He said, I think Luka is the foremost threat. This Lakers team, if they finish third in the West, it's a massive overachievement that Luka has dragged them to. Stein then goes on to say, I don't think Luka's case is being looked at properly. First of all, he's been much better defensively than advertised, but offensively, he's been even more otherworldly than he usually is. So I think he's right there. So that's Mark Stein's take, okay? Now, a couple of different things. One is, and I'm going to lead off on the show with this today with Eddie, again, 4 o'clock Eastern Time, Sirius XM NBA Radio. The technical foul that he received on Friday against the Nets should count against him. He hurt his team. In my estimation, that's like going out there and actually playing and giving zeros across the board. 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists. That's a detriment. The fact that he, couldn't keep his emotions under control and has left his team hanging tonight. Now, luckily, they should win anyway. It's the Washington Wizards. But the fact is, that's not an injury that is holding Luka out tonight. That's something of his own doing that he hasn't been able to keep his emotions in check. That's not missing a game for an injury, which is completely acceptable. That's leaving your teammates hanging, doing a detriment to your team by not being available. So I actually think that should factor in to the MVP case. And it's something that I'm factoring in. Like, for example, and this goes to not just this incident with Luka, it goes to his issues all season long. When there's this much talent in the league, you almost need to be perfect from start to finish. And I'm not saying that SGA, Wemby, and Jokic have been perfect from start to finish, but we also haven't had to get on their case to a high level, right? With SGA, it's been consistent greatness, right? Or at least consistently being very, very good. Same thing with Wembanyama, same thing with Jokic. Like, we've never sat down and actually had to rip any of those three guys at any point throughout the course of the season. There were struggles at times. You can nitpick on any of them, but we didn't really dig in and go at any of them. With Luka, there's been major swaths of the season where we're criticizing his behavior, his whining, his not getting back on defense, his lack of defense. Like, so there's been, 2 or 3 week stretches where he's had some major issues. Now, the flip side, you could also argue that nobody else, maybe outside of Jokic statistically, has had as good of a 3 or 4 week run as Luka is amidst right now. But again, it hasn't been consistent greatness from start to finish. It's been high peaks and low valleys for Luka. With everybody else, it's almost been just straight greatness. Maybe not the high peaks that Luka's had, but also not the low valleys that Luka's had. And I also don't understand how, let's assume, now this isn't my ballot, I've yet to make up my mind, but I could have any of the three, SGA, Wemby, or Jokic number one. I think that is fair. And I also think some people will have Luka number one. I personally wouldn't up to this point. But let's assume the Vegas odds are correct and that it's going to be SGA and Wemby in the top two. Why is Luka third ahead of Nikola Jokic? I don't understand that. Denver's only 1 game behind the Lakers in the standings. And on top of that, statistically, Jokic has Luka across the board. Like, the argument for Luka against Wembanyama and SGA to some extent that I see people making is, well, he's averaging more points, he's averaging more assists, he's averaging more rebounds than SGA. Okay, well, if that's the case, the argument for Jokic is he's averaging more rebounds than Luka. He's averaging more assists than Luka. He's averaging more blocks than Luka. He's doing all that despite having the ball in his hands less than Luka by a significant amount. He's shooting a higher percentage from the field as Jokic, a higher percentage from three, a higher percentage from the line, a higher effective field goal percentage. He leads in just about every advanced metric that people use. He is the better defender. While Jokic might not be Bill Russell, he's also not Luka Doncic. And oh, by the way, I think Jokic is underrated defensively because Jokic, one, is the communicator defensively. If you're ever watching these games, you see the way that he is placing guys in different spots on the floor. Jokic has the plays memorized for the opposition. Jokic leads the league in rebounds. And defensive rebounds is defense because that concludes the possession. That ends the stop. Can't end the stop without the rebound. So that counts defensively. So what's the argument for Luka over Jokic? He's only one game ahead of him in the standings right now. He only leads him statistically in points and steals, but again, doesn't do so as efficiently in regards to putting up the points. If Jokic took the same amount of shots, then he'd average similar points. So I don't understand the argument here for Luka Doncic to even be ahead of Jokic, never mind to be ahead of SGA and Wembanyama. I have Luka clearly fourth on my ballot as of right now. And by the way, we just received confirmation that we will be voting this year. Once again, I've been voting, I believe, since 2017 was my first year. All right, final subject before it's story time here with an interesting one on Joel Embiid and Mike Dunleavy Sr. from the draft back in 2014 when I was working with Dunleavy at the time. I just wanted to point this out with the Jaylen Brown situation because I do have Luka ahead of Jaylen Brown on my list. And I've seen some people like Michael Wilbon say that he's got Jaylen Brown first. I saw Isaiah Thomas say that it should be between Jaylen Brown and Wembanyama. I disagree with that. I've seen just about every single home game Jaylen Brown has played this year in person. And not that this should be the main reason that Jaylen Brown doesn't win the MVP, because there's been some other teams that have had success when the MVP candidates have sat. But my God, I've never seen a team have this amount of success when an MVP candidate is sat. And maybe historically there is a case of it. I just can't think of it. Boston beat Charlotte last night, one of the hottest teams in the NBA, best net rating in the sport over the last 2 months. And not only did they beat them on the road, they beat them without Jaylen Brown, and they beat them without Derek White. So they beat them without two of their top three players on the road, a hot team who had their starting lineup intact. And now Boston is 8-1 when Jaylen Brown sits. And they're not just winning without Jaylen Brown. They look like the 86 Celtics. They look like the 72 Lakers, the 67 Sixers. They beat Washington by 45, no Jaylen Brown. They beat Milwaukee by 27, no Jaylen Brown. Houston by 21. Sacramento by 19. Toronto and Phoenix each by 16. 15 over Charlotte last night. A couple of days ago in Boston, game I was at, a red-hot Hawks team. No Jaylen Brown. Beat them by 7. The only loss they have this year without Jaylen Brown on the floor came by 2 on the road in Indiana. 5 of the 8 wins with Brown not in the lineup have come against playoff teams. 7 of those 8 by double digits. 6 of the 8 on the road. That's a hell of a resume, sans Jaylen Brown. I mean, it really seems like this team wins regardless of who's playing, regardless of where they're playing, and regardless of who they're playing. And to me, that is a testament to Joe Mazzulla. So I haven't really figured out my voting yet on any of the different awards. To me, the lock, though, thus far, if I had to say, well, who's your rookie of the year? That's probably Con Knipple. Who's your MVP? Up to this point, probably Wemby, but still plenty of time for movement. Who's your most improved? Probably Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but time for movement. This race already might be over. Joe Mazzulla pretty much has that award locked up, all due respect to guys like Jordan Ott, J.B. Bickerstaff. That's the one award I can tell you. And then other things like Jaylen Brown, first-team All-NBA, it's likely, especially since I vote by position, and he, outside of Kawhi, has been the best forward in the sport this year. Derek White, maybe an all-defensive team. Maybe. Hugo Gonzalez, maybe an all-rookie team. But the one sure thing is Joe Mazzulla, coach of the year as of right now. And again, Jaylen Brown tweeted out last night, 50 wins at a gap year. Think about that, 50 wins in a gap year. And how difficult it is to reach that at that point. Like I went back and I looked this up today. Just think about this. This is supposed to be a gap year for the Boston Celtics. Right now, they're on pace for the 6th most wins in Knicks history. If they were the Knicks, this would be the 6th most wins the Knicks have ever had in their entire history. And the Knicks have been around for 75 plus years. The Celtics this year would have the 6th best record in Knicks history if they continue to win at this pace. And it was supposed to be a gap year. It'd be the 5th best season in Clippers history, the 6th in Kings history. And again, these are organizations that have been around forever. So quite the accomplishment. Okay, now we can wrap it up. After we got done right there with the comments in regards to current events. And I see some of you chiming in here with some of your comments. We got Doc, we got Stock Trader, we got BT Colton. So I appreciate you guys following along, okay? You guys asking questions like, do you think trading for Giannis this summer could get them over the top? I don't know who you're talking about specifically right now, but Giannis, I think, will move. We have Stock Trader saying he wants to see a reduction in the playoffs need to reduce something like 12 teams so organizations like Miami can't just coast. I do agree with that sometimes, there are too many postseason teams. Even in baseball, I used to like it where you just had the pennant winners for crying out loud. Now it is too many. I appreciate you guys chiming in. You can leave some more comments on Twitter at Termini Radio, at TERMINE Radio. We're also going to be using Instagram and TikTok at Termini NBA, at TERMINE. NBA, and then of course the YouTube page, you leave them there as well. I'll go back and I'll read some after. But let's do story time now with Mike Dunleavy Sr. About Mike Dunleavy Sr. He's not joining the program right now. At some point I will have Dunleavy on the show because my favorite thing to do with my favorite types of interviews are with the executives after they've already retired and they can like look back on deals that almost happened or things that they almost did in the draft. That's about as interesting as it gets, is talking to a former executive and saying, well, I was trying to do this on the draft night, or this guy was trying to do this on draft night. This trade fell through. Nobody heard of it, though. Then they'll talk about some of the best workouts that they had ever seen. And that's where Dunleavy comes in. So Mike Dunleavy Sr., I worked with him for a couple of years. The smartest guy in the entire sport. So I've worked with a lot of different people, and I've learned a ton. I learned nothing more than from Dunleavy Sr. All right, smartest guy I've ever talked to. So 2014, we're at the NBA draft. That's the year of Joel Embiid. It's the year of Andrew Wiggins going first overall to Minnesota, or Cleveland, really, before he then gets traded to Minnesota for Kevin Love. It's the year with Milwaukee taking Jabari Parker. So Bucks ownership, who Dunleavy had a relationship with because Dunleavy served as a coach and executive there for several years, they were asking Dunleavy for his different opinions on different players. Dunleavy told me that he told the Milwaukee Bucks that they needed to take Joel Embiid. And remember, he was having some health issues at the time. They needed to take Joel Embiid unless it was guaranteed that he would never walk again. He said, unless you are told he will never walk again, you need to take Joel Embiid. No ifs, ands, or buts. Because Dunleavy had told me that out of all the people he had seen work out, and he had seen some all-time greats work out over the course of his 30 years, nobody impressed him more than Joel Embiid. Said it was the most impressive workout he has ever seen, and at the time, the 30-plus years that he had been involved in the NBA from a coach and executive perspective. Anyway, that clearly didn't happen. Milwaukee didn't listen to him. Andrew Wiggins went number 1 overall. Jabari Parker went number 2 overall to the Bucks. Obviously, in retrospect, Embiid would go number 1. Not really number 1 because Jokic got taken 41st in the same draft, but nobody had their eye on Jokic. So really, Embiid should have went number 1 overall. Sixers, in fact, do take Embiid 3rd, take the risk on the injury. And in fact, it ended up being the only pick that the Philadelphia got right during the whole trust the process era, because for the most part it was swings and misses. Michael Carter-Williams, Nerlens Noel, Jahlil Okafor, Dario Saric, the likes. But they got that one right. And again, Dunleavy, to his credit, said you need to draft him if he can walk again. So it doesn't stop there. Afterwards, Dunleavy and I end up on the subway from Brooklyn back into Manhattan, okay? So Philadelphia is not far from Manhattan, obviously. A lot of Sixers fans make the trip up to the draft. They're sitting in the stands. They're taking the subway back afterwards. So I'm on the subway with Dunleavy. The Sixer fans are apoplectic. They do not like the idea that Joel Embiid got drafted. So Dunleavy overhears this, starts explaining to everybody on the subway, filled with Sixer fans, why they should be ecstatic that Embiid, in fact, went to Philadelphia. He's telling them you got the best guy in the draft. You got a guy that, if he's healthy, can historically be good. So all of a sudden, the entire train shifts their tune. They go from being just dejected to absolutely thrilled that the Sixers took Embiid because of what Dunleavy is saying. Then the train starts chanting, get this, Jim Boeheim's name. Clapping, Jim Boeheim. Jim Boeheim. And the reason they're doing that is they think Dunleavy, they understand that he's a coach. They just think he's Jim Boeheim, not Mike Dunleavy Sr. So, Dunleavy was happy that he was getting the attention and that he changed the minds of the fans there on the subway car. But they mistook him for Jim Boeheim. I guess it's because, he's a coach. He doesn't have hair. So they're all the same, apparently, according to the Sixer fan. Anyway, that was one of the many good Dunleavy stories that I have in my back pocket. I hope you enjoyed. And obviously, Philadelphia is glad that Milwaukee did not listen to Dunleavy Sr. Because they ended up with Joel Embiid. And even though he's been injured more than half his career, missed more games than he's played, it still worked out pretty well for them. And they've got an MVP out of it. And heck, Philadelphia looks really scary right now with him coming back at the right time. Paul George, who I don't think should be allowed to play because of the PEDs or the illegal drugs that he was using. And then Maxey coming back. So they could be difficult to beat, at least in a one-off here, for either Detroit or Boston at the top of the Eastern Conference. All right, so that's our show for today. Some thoughts on the job Eric Spoelstra and the Heat are doing right now, where Luka sits on my MVP ballot, including it should be held against him that he got ejected or that he's not going to play here later tonight because of the 16 techs and the suspension, and then some thoughts there on Jaylen Brown before we wrapped up with the Dunleavy Sr. Story. So I'm trying to post clips of these on Twitter at Termini Radio, at TERMINE Radio. Also put them up on Instagram at Termini NBA, at Termini NBA. Have yet to do it on TikTok. We'll get it moving over there as well. From what I'm told, what you're supposed to do with the YouTube in order to grow the audience, make these shows more consistent. More people we get here, the more shows that I will do. So go over to YouTube, like it, subscribe it. We'll get the ball rolling. And hopefully you're going to join me and Eddie Johnson 4 to 7 Eastern time for our normal NBA Today show on Sirius XM NBA Radio. So that wraps up our half hour here with Turbity Crashes Out. Appreciate our boy Deepak for always making me look sharp. You can see some of the pictures to the suits that Deepak offers over at buydcla.com. That's where you'll find him on the internet, buydcla.com. If you just want to follow him on Instagram, see some of the awesome suits that he puts together, then it is DCLA. DCLA is his handle there on Instagram, but he's sponsoring the show. So DCLA and Deepak, we appreciate the support here for the program. Talk to you in a little bit over on Sirius XM NBA Radio. Enjoy, everybody. Thanks for stopping by.